We can't help but wonder why screaming or grunting works for tennis players, weightlifters, and martial artists. It seems to give them that little extra push right up to and over the edge. So what happens when a trained martial artist isn't allowed to scream?
To put the myth of screaming to the test, we brought in world champion martial artist Paul Pumphrey. Paul breaks more concrete with his bare bones than anyone else in the world. And when he breaks things, he screams. To test if screaming increases Paul's power, we set up 2 stacks for him to break. For the first stack, Paul's gonna let loose one of his signature screams. Then, for the second stack, Paul won't make a sound. He'll try to break the stack without screaming. We wire Paul up with a microstrain accelerometer to measure the speed he generates with his forearms. Load cells on the bottom of the stacks will measure how much force he generates during the 2 breaks.
For me, screaming just flushes out everything out of my system, and I'm ready to just destroy stuff.
Sensors are ready, systems armed.
Systems armed.
First up, the scream.
That's a sign of a successful break.
The fact that everything is shattered on the floor.
Somewhere in the rubbles are load cells.
There it is.
So it looks as if we have a peak on the one load cell of about 989 pounds of force, and on the other one about 1,058 pounds of force. You have about 2,000 pounds of force. That's a big number.
The 2,000 pounds of force generated by Paul's screaming break blows out the entire stack. But will he be able to generate that kind of force when he bites his tongue and doesn't scream?
So now this is the big second break. This is now the break with no scream.
Right.
Now, have you ever tried to break a stack without screaming?
Never. Now I'm worried. To mimic what I just did and to take that to the stack of concrete and not scream, it's gonna be very awkward for me.
Take away the scream. And for Paul, that could be trouble.
If I'm not able to scream and follow through this shot, all that force that I've generated is gonna be redirected back up into me, and it's gonna hurt. Effectively calling this thing, it's gonna hit back. It will. And I don't appreciate that.
It's time to hit the bricks and the mute button.
Are you psyched up for this?
I'm psyched up.
But get psyched up without actually screaming.
Stealth mode.
All right.
Ninja time.
Medic!
Without screaming, Paul doesn't generate enough force to drive through the entire stack. The energy rebounds off the unbroken last block and bounces right back to where it came from, Paul's arms.
This whole thing broke, and on the last one, all the force just came shooting right back up.
And I can feel it in my arms.
Since Paul's not screaming, we'll let the data do the talking.
What I have here are the results from the break, okay? So he had about 2,000 pounds of force when he did the scream with it. And he only had about 1,500 pounds of force when he didn't scream.
So the myth does appear to be true, but how does it work? A power move in sports is a complex combination of physics, body chemistry, and performance psychology. aggression triggers a shot of adrenaline and a higher heart rate, increasing blood flow to the limbs and organs. The lungs contract aggressively, forcing oxygenated blood to the extremities. As the scream suddenly releases from the body, the entire core muscle group contracts at once, linking the muscles into a unified chain of power. And perhaps most importantly, it gives the psychological boost of a battle cry, unleashing a warrior's rage on his target in a wave of pure energy. Paul generated 25% more power by screaming. If screaming worked for every athlete the way it does for Paul, 25% more power would turn a 100-mile-per-hour serve into a 125-mile-per-hour rocket. And a 400-pound clean and jerk into a 500-pound lift. So screamers, keep on screaming.
I'm very surprised with the results. I really didn't know what the results were going to be. And now I'm a believer in screaming. You ain't ever going to have me not scream anymore.
Coming up next, we hit the hardwood to see if the highest flyers in basketball have any extra giddy up in their hang time. Back in a sec with more of Sports Science Myths.